Welcome to the new series of Speak Up, the television and social media platform for Freemasonry in New Zealand. I am Barry Rushton, your host, and thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight's program is a bit different, as I'm talking with only one guest, plus of course our regular contributor Graham Houston, and that guest is Pat Cooney, who has come the farthest to be with us today, all the way from Alexandra. Pat is the new Divisional Grandmaster-elect, whose responsibility covers the entire South Island. Imagine that. It is a pleasure to have him with us. And closing out the show, of course, is our regular contributor Graham Houston with another enthralling episode about a famous Freemason. Congratulations, my friend. You are the Divisional Grandmaster-elect for the Southern region, which is all of the South Island, correct?
Indeed, yes.
That is a wonderful achievement. There's three divisions for those in the audience who may not know what we're talking about. New Zealand's divided into northern, central and southern regions, and there's one person, the Divisional Grandmaster, who is in theory responsible for those areas, and this is your new job.
It is indeed. It's going to be an interesting challenge for 3 years.
Well, we're going to talk about that shortly, but first of all, you come from that beautiful little town called Alexandra, right?
Indeed, yes.
Tell us a bit about that. On the banks of the Clutha River, I love that area.
Yeah, it's a beautiful town. Been going as a town for 150 years, roughly. It's predominantly established as a gold mining service town,
Yep.
And then more latterly as a horticultural service town, and even more recently for vineyards, etc. Never forgetting, of course, that the background or the spine of our income comes from our farmers, particularly sheep farmers and beef farmers.
Well, it's the vineyard part that I'd be extremely interested in, to be quite frank. Now, Lawson, also too, I think a lot of people might not know, but originally Alexandra was called Alexandra South, a little bit like Palmerston and Palmerston North, because there was another Alexandra, as I think you know, in the North Island, right, until they changed their name back to what we know today. What's that little town as we know it today?
It's Pirongia, which is in the King Country,
Yep.
and Alexandra, as we now know it, took its name in 1867, when I think it had always been called Alexandra after Alexander of Denmark, but in order to differentiate between the two towns, it adopted the south initially.
Yeah. Now, your little town, I'll call it little town, but it's a lovely town. About 6,000 people, right, or thereabouts?
Yeah, about that, yes. Yeah, it's a very much a service town. It's a beautiful town for bringing up children. The disadvantage of the locality in terms of that is that for tertiary education they need to relocate to, say, Dunedin or Christchurch or elsewhere. But it's a wonderful town for young families. It's got probably greater than the national average of elderly people, because it's a wonderful climate to live in. But again, we need the lifeblood of the young families. We've got very good educational facilities in Central Otago as well as in Alexandra. Wonderful sporting opportunities, and some of which take advantage of our climate.
Yeah, great. You have the four seasons for sure, right there.
We certainly do. We used to have 4 distinct seasons. And it's important, for example, the cold, because it killed a lot of bugs, it set a lot of fruit.
It's great Pinot Noir, let me tell you.
Oh, without a doubt, and it makes a very nice Pinot Gris, apparently. I'm not a wine buff, but I'm well aware of the vineyards, particularly, and that's made a great use of some of our land, because we used to work out the animal to land basis on, instead of so many sheep to the hectare, it was so many hectares, or so many acres as it was, to the sheep. And with the development, particularly of vineyards, it's put a lot of what we'd probably call marginal land to very good productive use.
Pat, speaking of fruit that you mentioned before, I believe, if my memory serves me right, that Alexandra had a blossom festival. Is that still going?
Yes, it started in 1957, and 2 weeks ago we celebrated the 62nd Blossom Festival. When it first started, the floats were really to highlight the blossom that occurred in Central Otago from its fruit growing area, and the floats were essentially made from or adorned with paper flowers, and that's carried on. It's changed a little over time because it's getting harder and harder for people to spend the time making these, but we had, I think, 8 floats in this past parade, and a lot of what we call florries, which are supermarket trolleys done up something to do with
Flowers.
flowers, and it just provides another opportunity for people to get involved in the annual celebration of spring.
Great to know it's still going and popular.
Absolutely, it was a good turnout. We had beautiful weather. In fact, I think over the 62 years, there's probably only been about one difficult day, which is wonderful in itself.
Not like the rugby last week, right?
No.
You were actually for 6 years, I think, the chief executive of the Central Otago Council. But you did see a great opportunity, Alexandra, and you actually bought two little businesses, moulded them into one, correct, and turned it into a successful enterprise the last 25 years, right?
An opportunity came up for us to look at a couple of businesses which were in the same building, so it made it good, and we thought, right, well, this is a real opportunity for us to settle into the town, which we did, and it was the first time I had worked seriously with my wife. It gave me, in fact, a real eye-opener as to how good she was. We had 4 children, which Carolyn was, as a stay-at-home mum, had a very significant role, and I'm very proud of that role, whilst, if you like, I had the traditional man role of being the breadwinner. But coming together, working together in a business for the first time, it was quite an eye-opener as to her skills.
Great. And I believe both of you are still active in sports, and she is too, but I believe you have a number of things which I am quite fascinated about. There's one, you're great passion about rugby, and the other one, which we'll talk about in a minute, is curling. I'll hold that one just for a second. But a lot of people might not know that, of course, that you were skilled in rugby refereeing yourself, reached a high level, but you were commissioned to actually teach other referees and linespeople, and were even seconded overseas at one stage to teach these people. Now that's quite fascinating. So how do you teach a teacher?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a case of getting the focus right. Important in the game of rugby in particular that you don't get caught up with the little things. I remember one of our training sessions where we had an international referee running it, and his comment was, in the line out, there were 108 offences opportunities.
Possible.
So you would never get the game started again if you got into a line out. So it's important. The focus that I took was for the referees, does it matter?
Yeah.
Did the offence
Really
or potential offence have an impact on the game?
Yeah, okay.
If it didn't, let it go. And one of the adages I did have was you should referee the game with your whistle in your pocket. By the time you get the whistle to your mouth, you've had a time to think about, did it matter?
Oh, that's a very good idea.
It's not practical, but it's an interesting principle.
So with the World Cup on at this present time, and unfortunately we couldn't see the game last week because it was cancelled, but if you see something, you must watch it. And instead of watching the players, you must watch the referee, I feel, and say, oh, he's done a great job, or oh, how'd you miss that? Or do you jump off the couch sometimes and throw bricks at the television?
There's an element of frustration, without a doubt. It's been a little while since I've been actively involved, but I always looked at the fact that the referee's position is critical to what he can pick up. The referees today, particularly at national level, international level, of course, have assistant referees, who we used to call touch judges, but they're all wired for sound, and they have an opportunity to have a significant influence. I have some difficulty with some of the offside rulings and
forward passes too.
Forward passes, but one of my major gripes is referees will often pick up not straights into line-outs, but they don't seem to be able to pick up the fact in a scrum that the ball goes under about the lock's feet.
Isn't that the truth?
It is. Well,
Sid Going would have got pulled up for that, wouldn't he?
Without a doubt,
Yeah.
and I think we were much more vigilant in the good old days, because it's an important part. It's an opportunity to restart the game, but it is a contest. You have a scrum in rugby league, and it's not really a contest.
No,
it is, and that's fine. It's a way to start the game. You can argue in rugby it's a way to start the game, but it should also be a contest. And I think by not managing that properly, the referees aren't allowing a true contest to occur.
The second thing I'm dying to talk to you about is this thing called curling. Now, people who have seen it, it's amazing. You have this big stone with a handle on it, and the person comes in slowly gliding and sort of lets it go, and then you have these two crazy people with a couple of brooms skipping in front of it. Now, obviously, I'm sure that just makes more water so it glides easier. What's this whole thing about? It looks like lawn bowls in a straight line,
Well, it's called curling because the stones do curl. And you make them curl by whichever way you turn the handle.
Okay.
So if you want it to curl that way, you turn the handle that way. If you want it to curl the other way, you turn it the other way as you release it. Indoor or sliding or Olympic curling is different to crampet curling, which is your outdoor style, but much more precise, and the sweepers have a significant role. You have the skip on the head, or director on the head, and it's his or her responsibility to ensure that the right line is being taken. The sweepers, it's their responsibility to make sure that the stone gets to where it's supposed to. Right. Now, indoor curling, they have what we call pebbles, where the water is sprayed on the ice and it has little pebbles, and the stones run over the pebbles. And the idea of the sweeping is to, it's just to warm it up so there's less friction, and therefore the stone will move further. But indoor curling is significantly more precise than outdoor curling.
And so both you and your wife made the actual New Zealand seniors teams, right? And I believe you came runner-up, I think it was in Canada at one stage, what, 2013?
2013, yes.
Fantastic.
Yes, it was. It was Carolyn had gone, she went to 4 Worlds, and I went to 2. The latter 2 together, we went to Denmark together, and then we went to Canada together. And the last one, yes, the men's team was successful to the extent of being runners-up to Canada.
Now, back to Freemasonry. Being in South Island, of course, this is a large area. You've got the Waitoa Lodge number 111, I believe, in Picton, and then you've got the Fortitude Lodge down in Bluff. I mean, this is a huge area. I mean, how do you possibly think you're actually going to, well, how are you going to handle this in that distance? What are you doing?
Well, I think it's important to realise that the role of the Divisional Grandmaster is administrative as opposed to ceremonial or pastoral, which falls within the lot of the District Grandmasters. The important thing for me is to ensure that I've got excellent working relationships with the 5 District Grandmasters that we all have, and also with the divisional team, in the main being the Divisional Secretary, Divisional Treasurer, the Divisional Grand Armourer and the Divisional Lecturer. But the reliance that I will have is dealing directly with the District Grandmasters and ensuring that they've got the support they need from me and through me from National Office to enable them to effectively carry out their roles.
Correct. The 3 years before you became District Grandmaster, about between 2013 and 2016, the district, or your district, I think, raised about $54,000 for the Helicopter Rescue Trust, right? And then in your period, this last 3 years, I believe you've also raised over $50,000 for the St. John ambulance, right? I guess nothing hits home more than if one of your own children has an accident and relies on those entities, and that's exactly what happened to your boy, correct? Tell us a story involved with that.
Yeah, well, we started the process of fundraising probably in 2017 after the Grand Master came down and for one of our very senior Grand Lodge officers who achieved 50 years of Grand Lodge service. And at that meeting, the Grand Master announced that he would provide seeding funds to go to any project that the District Grand Master would like to promote. As you've indicated, we were very successful in the previous term, so I adopted St. John as an opportunity for fundraising. 12 months into that event, my son had a significant accident where he broke his back and did quite a bit of other damage to his body. On the day of the accident, he required St. John twice to assist, and he was then, that night he was flown to Dunedin Public Hospital in the helicopter, and that certainly sheeted home to me the fact that we never know when things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And,
isn't that the truth?
And I couldn't, I mean, I wouldn't say it's luck, but if you could say, you know, I couldn't believe that I had the luck of the Irish to the extent that in the 2013-16 period, Freemasonry and Otago Lakes had raised significant funds for the rescue helicopter. We're currently in our period raising it for St. John, and I had no idea that my family would be a beneficiary of these services, and I'm eternally grateful for the support that we got, and it's given me a real fillip to the proposal that we've got to assist.
And your boy's fine? He's good now?
He's much better. He's actually going in for an operation later this month. They inserted a couple of rods in the spine, and they're to be removed. So after that, hopefully he will be pretty much back to normal.
Fantastic. Well, that's great news. Tell me now also too, you inherit this job that you're taking on, the new one, from another well-known Freemason, Right Worshipful Brother Rob Angelo, right? In fact, he served for 4 years, I believe. You're doing 3. What the efforts that he has done, I know you admire, I'm sure. What parts do you think you're going to carry on that he may have started, and what parts do you see, or new things that you see that you're going to bring in your term? What would you like to be remembered for at the end of 3 years compared to Right Worshipful Brother Rob?
I think what I've found with Right Worshipful Brother Rob is that he's been very consultative. Communication's been very important. We haven't always agreed on matters raised between us, but we have respected one another's views, and that's what I've found a real strength of his, and that's something I want to engender with my relationship with the District Grandmasters, because I'm relying on them to achieve what we can do for Freemasonry, and inherently in that they're also reliant on the lodges in their district and the brethren of the lodges to carry on this great boost that we've got in terms of speaking up for Freemasonry. Speak Up Freemasonry is a wonderful campaign. It's not aimed primarily at boosting membership, but it's definitely there to improve the relationship of Freemasonry within the community. And I think that's something that I want to engender. I had the mantra, well, in this past 3 years, of MMM, which is more Master Masons, but significantly more meaningful meetings, because I think that's where we keep the brethren in tune with Freemasonry. It's all very well having good numbers increasing, but if we can't keep the interest within Freemasonry, and that starts really at meetings, then there's a drop-off of current members and new members, and that at the end of the day doesn't help Freemasonry. We want to have strong membership, good membership, and a strong place within the community, and that's my aim, to ensure that at the end of 3 years Freemasonry has its rightful place within the South Island community.
Well, we wish you all the best in your term, honestly, and I think that at the end of the 3 years, our Speak Up television show will still be going. We'll bring you back on. We'll see if you can say, yep, job well done, and chuck the rugby ball to your successor. So, very much, congratulations again. Look forward to seeing you in 3 years' time.
Thank you very much, Barry. It's great.
And coming up, of course, is our regular contributor, Graham. It is great to see you. I believe you've got a great story about a well-known man, a great philanthropist, and someone who I think everybody will get to know.
I certainly have. Let me tell you a story, Barry.
I'm ready. I'm listening.
Let me tell you about the Frederick Potter.
Yep.
He, as you said, was one of the greatest philanthropists for Freemasonry in New Zealand.
It's a hard word, isn't it?
It's a hard word.
It's a hard word. We got it.
And for the community at large as well. He was a man that was born in 1857 in London when times were really, really tough, and died in 1941 at the age of 84. Yeah. His parents were William and Eliza Potter, and they came to New Zealand with their 2 sons. They had 2 sons at that stage. Came to New Zealand in 1858, largely to get away from the tough times that they were having in London.
So that means he was not even one, or just one, all the way on a ship from England.
And then there were 7 others that were born in New Zealand, but 3 of them died in infancy. So he came from a very large family, one of 9. His father was a coach builder, and when he came to New Zealand, he joined a firm called McLeod and Gee in Auckland, who were coach builders. And they built everything from ambulances and night carts and water carts and buggies and every sort of cart that you can imagine. And so they built that as one of probably the biggest coach building firms in New Zealand at that stage. In December 1866, that business was dissolved and a new business was formed. And that was with the Thomas Gee and William Potter.
Right. So he snuck his way in.
He snuck his way in, and they became. And so they worked at that business, growing the business substantially. They were originally in Grey Street, which is now Grey's Avenue in Auckland, and then moved down to a very large site in Wakefield Street, Wellesley Street, part of it now is Merrill Drive, and they had an 80 metre frontage of their place. Wow. 2 buildings in there. And the Auckland Star reported at the time that neither Sydney nor Melbourne had such an extensive paint shop as what these boys did in Auckland here. And they had 33 people working just in the paint shop. That didn't include the blacksmith area where they had a big team of guys there. They had 6 fires and a big furnace in there. So in addition to being a coach builder, in 1913 he became an auctioneer, which is quite a lot different from being a coach builder. He was an auctioneer and sold everything from used corrugated iron right through to motor vehicles. About that time, the motor vehicle industry had started to move, and motor vehicles were certainly taking over from the horse and buggy days and the carts that they were making. And so he ventured into the motor vehicle business with a Mr. Faithful. But that venture failed when Mr. Faithful ran into financial difficulties. Now, at that particular point, he decided to call it quits and closed the business down. But remember, he was age 70 at that stage, and if you look at the life expectancy back in those days, he was probably well on the advanced side of age. So he closed the business down. In 1916, and this is the interesting part, where does this all lead to? How does he become the giver of so many things to the council, to Auckland in particular? In 1916, he offered land in Dominion Road to the Mount Eden Council. It was finally accepted. That today is known as Potter Park. And if you drive down Dominion Road, right on the corner there, you will find Potter Park. That was given to there. The value of the land at that stage, and in today's value, would have been about $1.5 million. So that's a lot of money that he just donated. That park was opened by the Governor-General, Lord Jellicoe, in about 1921. And so there was quite a big affair for the opening of that park. In 1926, he donated 6 acres in Queenstown Road or Parr Road area to what is now known as Seymour Park. Seymour Park was named after it was his mother's maiden name, and it was also his second Christian name. He was Frederick Seymour Potter. That land was given to the council, and he also gave £600 towards draining the land at that stage. And they grazed it for a long time until in 1933 they opened that as a sports ground, and it is still used as a sports ground today. He also donated 23 acres of land to the Tiki Punga in Whangarei for the building and construction of an orphanage for boys and for destitute boys. In 1928, he gave 6 acres of land in Panmure to the Freemasons for the building of rented accommodation for aged Freemasons and their wives. And I think he got a little bit impatient with the lack of progress, so he went ahead and built 2 of those houses on the land himself, in addition to giving it. In 1929, he donated an acre of land to the Takapuna Council. And that land is in a prime position today, and then most people around that area on the north shore of Auckland and Takapuna will pass Potter Park every day.
I have cut through that park many times.
And so that was just another, and I think he had this ability to acquire land like that in prime spots at the right time. In 1929, he gave 9.5 acres to set up a home for an orphanage and for destitute boys in Papakura. And then in 1931, to make sure that that venture was successful, he gave the equivalent, he gave then £50,000 to ensure that that project did succeed. Now, the Potter Trust continues to receive income today from the land that it has, still based in Rutland Street and Wakefield Street. And so it's a source of income that it does. And its assets today of the Potter Trust would total somewhere around about $30 million. So it's a very, very large trust. When his first wife Ellen died, shortly after the birth of their first child, the child died. And that was his only child. Yeah. And he never had any other children. However, he had a great passion and a great feeling for children. Hence, as you can see from the money that he gave and the land that he gave for the building of orphanages and for homes for destitute children. He believed every child should have a chance in life. He believed that every child should go to school from the age of 7. He believed every child should go into a trade. He did not and was not a great advocate of tertiary training, believing trade was where he should go. Isn't it funny? That's just like we're talking about today in 2019. Stop sending everyone to university. We need tradesmen.
True.
Now, of course, a man like this was a great Freemason.
He was.
He was a great Freemason. He belonged to Lodge Waitemata, number 689 of English Constitution. He was initiated very early, January in 1898. A couple of months later, I think it was in May, that he was passed in 1898, and was at the end of the year, December of 1898, he was raised as a Master Mason.
Great.
And although the records do show that he sort of resigned in 1932, that was from the English Constitution, but he became quite a regular attender of Lodge Papakura whilst he was managing the Papakura home for the boys that he had donated and that he had funded. So Frederick Seymour, a great man, great for her community man, and there's so many things in Auckland today and in the northern region that bear his mark. Just the more recent one, if you go out to the Botanical Gardens, and you'll find the Potter Gardens, the educational type garden which has been built in the Auckland Botanical Gardens by the Potter Trust, a Freemason initiative, and again, Potter.
Remember we showed that just a few programs ago, right?
We did. We talked about that, yes, about the Potter Trust. So Frederick Potter was a great addition to New Zealand, was a wise decision that happened when his father William brought him to New Zealand at 1 year of age. Good man.
Another great choice, Graham. Good seeing you, mate. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Okay?
Certainly will. Thanks, Barry.
Great. Well, that's our show for this week. Don't forget, if you'd like to know more about Freemasonry, and you won't find it in the Dan Brown's book, but you will by going to the Grand Lodge website, which is freemasonsnz.org. In the meantime, if you've been thinking, planning, or asking questions about joining Freemasonry, we have a website for this very purpose. It's simply welcometofreemasonry.co.nz. We hold a regular dinner experience where you can meet other Freemasons before making a decision to join. So once again, thanks for joining us. See you next week.